Hi everybody, I'm Jen from KetoCookingWins.com and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make a restaurant quality butter sauce, lemon butter sauce in fact, to go with fresh asparagus. This sauce is so good, you're not going to believe how easy it is to make. And it's totally keto and it's totally fantastic. So stick around, come on back, and I'll show you how to make from start to finish in under 10 minutes this amazing steamed asparagus with a lemon butter sauce. Welcome back. We're going to start to make our asparagus with a lemon butter sauce with about 1.5 pounds of fresh asparagus. And I got this lovely asparagus from a local grower, and you can see that the stalks are kind of mixed matched. They're not all beautiful the way they come in a nice bundle from the grocery store that have been graded based on size and diameter and length. These are just sort of a motley crew of asparagus, but that's part of the beauty of it. But it's so fresh. I think that they must have been in the field yesterday or the day before, and they were picked then, so they're unbelievably fresh, especially when you consider that most asparagus in the off-season is shipped from Mexico, and depending on where you are, that can be a long haul. To get started with this dish, the first thing we need to do is prepare the asparagus. Now, asparagus is a really delicate vegetable. Despite it being on sort of a tough woody stalk, it can overcook really very quickly. So we're going to be very careful about how we cook this asparagus. But before we even get started in that, we have to clean it. And the first thing you want to do is snap your asparagus. You can get the kids involved in this. It's kind of fun. Hold your asparagus and just bend it until it breaks. You're going to discard the woody end, and you're going to keep this end. The kids can get involved in this. They love breaking things, don't they? My kids used to love helping me. Now they love eating. So I'm just going to go through and snap all of my asparagus like this. And it won't take me very long because there's not a whole pile of it. And then the next thing we need to do is wash asparagus. Now, I don't know how much you know about asparagus, but asparagus grows in sandy soil. And it grows up from under the ground. And it pushes up through the soil, through the sand. And so what happens is a lot of sand gets trapped in the brushy end of that asparagus. So we need to wash it super, super carefully and very, very thoroughly, because the last thing you want to do is bite into an asparagus dish and there be grit. So now that I've trimmed all of my asparagus, I'm going to go ahead and wash it. I'll be right back because I'm going to take a minute to wash it very thoroughly. So the real hero of this dish is the sauce, which is velvety, buttery, and just a right hit of lemon to it. But before we can get to the sauce, we have to make our asparagus and get it nice and cooked. There's a simple way to make asparagus. You can just make it in a saucepan on top of the stove. I've got hardly any water in the bottom of the pan, just a little bit really, just enough to help steam the asparagus, and I'm going to give it a pinch of salt because all veggies love salt. So we're going to bring this up to the boil, and it won't take very long, and it's so tasty. And in the meantime, I'm going to talk to you about the ingredients in this sauce. This is essentially a butter sauce. In restaurants and fine dining establishments, you'll see a lot of sauces. They're called beurre blanc, which is very similar. It's a very delicate sauce. This particular version is a lot easier to make than the super delicate ones that they make in fine dining restaurants. This one is a little bit easier to handle, comes together a little bit easier, no lack of flavor to it, and if you run into trouble, you can grab an immersion blender and bring that sauce right back to its proper consistency. It tends to break a little bit if you overcook it. So what happens when a sauce breaks is you see that the butter and the oil start to separate. So the creaminess and the oil will start to separate, and your sauce looks like oil with little floating puddles in it. And it's not so nice. But we're not going to do that, and I'll show you how in just a second. So our asparagus is going to go in some boiling water, just like that, so that there's just a little bit of water in the bottom, and essentially we're going to steam the asparagus. It just takes a couple of minutes, and you don't want to overcook asparagus. Of course, the thicker the asparagus, a little bit longer cooking time is required. If it's really thin, it won't take very long at all. So when you go to buy your asparagus, You want to look for asparagus bundles that have asparagus in roughly the same diameter. You don't want to get a bundle of mix and match put together like that. Thin asparagus is not younger asparagus. It's a common misconception. It's just the way the asparagus comes up out of the soil. Sometimes the stalks are fatter, sometimes they're pencil thin. Thinner does not mean younger, so don't go thinking that you're going to get, really young tender asparagus if you get the really thin stuff. My personal preference is the big, thick asparagus. I just find it's got more flavor to it, it's got more meatiness to it, and it's a little bit easier to not overcook. You don't want to overcook asparagus, it's nasty. So my asparagus has come to a boil. You can see how the color has changed. And I'm just going to let this cook for a couple of minutes. And then when the asparagus is cooked, I'll come back and we'll start building our sauce. So don't go too far, and I'll be right back. So my asparagus is just about done. Let me show you how I check. Of course, you can take a bite of one and see if it's still tender crisp. Or you can pick up a stalk. They're hot, be careful, and look for a little bit of bend near the bottom where you snapped it. If you get a little bit of bend without it snapping, it's tender crisp. If it bends really easily, you probably overcooked it. If it doesn't bend very easily at all, it's still quite rigid, give it another minute or two and try it out. Alright, let me get my asparagus out of the pan because we are going to use the same pan to build our sauce. So there's our asparagus, we'll just let it cool. I'm going to dump the water. Perfect. Okay, so step number one in building our sauce is we have some chicken stock. I've got about 3 tablespoons of chicken stock. And I've got about 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. Not very much liquid yet. Most of the liquid is going to come from our butter. I'm going to turn Mr. Tasty on because I want to reduce this liquid by a little bit. Reducing means letting it boil until you basically evaporate some of the liquid. And we're looking to evaporate this, reduce it is the proper term, by about half. So we're going to bring this to a boil, which will happen very quickly because there's really not much liquid in there. Also into this sauce, we're going to put some heavy whipping cream and, of course, butter, and that's about it. We are not going to add any salt because I'm using salted butter. If you wanted to have more control over the salt content, use unsalted butter and then season it just the way you like it at the end of the cooking time. You can also use vegetable stock instead of chicken stock. I would not use beef stock. It might be a little bit heavy in flavor. And I'm just stirring it down with my silicone whisk in my nonstick pan. These things are great. If you don't have a silicone whisk, grab one. Go shopping on Amazon, pick yourself up one. There we go, my liquid has come down. Okay, now I'm going to turn the heat way down because I don't want to boil my sauce. I want to melt the butter into it without boiling it. If you boil the crap out of your sauce, then you're going to end up with a broken sauce like I talked about. Okay, I'm going to put in my cream. Okay, now you want to whisk this fairly vigorously because cream and lemon juice don't always play very nicely together. Some brands of cream will actually maybe curdle a little bit. But some vigorous whisking should take care of that. Or you can pop in your immersion blender and just take care of those lumps pretty quickly and easily. Alright, so I've got a 1/4 cup of butter and I've broken it into chunks. If I were to dump all of my butter in at once, it would overwhelm the sauce and I would end up with a pile of goo. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to emulsify, there's another cooking term, I'm going to emulsify in some butter a bit at a time building the sauce. So, turn it down a little bit. Alright, just a couple at a time. There you guys go. And I'm going to whisk you in. Now the gorgeous thing about butter sauces is they're so velvety and so delicious. And this is kind of a foolproof way of making them. So you just want to take your time. The heat is barely on, just enough to keep the butter from melting because it was cold when I put it in. Once your butter has basically melted, go ahead and add a couple more chunks. And we're just going to keep going like this, building our sauce and whisking in that butter. As you can see already, it's a pale golden color. And I just keep adding the butter and whisking it in. Now, butter sauces seem pretty thin and you might be a little nervous when you're making it. Don't go reaching for the xanthan gum or the cornstarch or anything to thicken it up, because as this sauce cools a little bit, the butter will thicken the sauce ever so slightly. It's not ever going to be the consistency of a gravy. It won't be thick like that, but it will be perfectly lovely. And it's going to coat that asparagus fabulously. A bit more butter goes in. I've got about half of my butter in now. Look at that. Doesn't that look good enough to eat with just a spoon? A little bit more. And we're nearly done. I've got just about all my butter in. Just a wee bit more to go. Now, if you're doing strict keto, you probably want to use grass-fed butter. But this is just regular supermarket store butter. It's nothing fancy, and it's going to taste just fine. A little bit more. That's it. Oh, just a wee bit more butter in here. Scrape it off my plate. There we go. And we are nearly done. See that? We're going to end up with slightly more than a quarter cup of sauce, because we did add some cream to it and some chicken stock and lemon juice. But essentially it's a quarter cup of sauce. It is going to be pretty high in fat because there's a quarter pound of butter in there, a quarter cup of butter. But, of course, that's the beauty of keto. There are no carbs in this. Really no carbs to speak of per serving. And that, my friends, is just about it. I'm going to finish whisking this in and I'll be right back to show you how we can plate it up. Alright, so I finished whisking in my sauce. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh, and it is so good. It's so well balanced. It's got a perfect hit of lemon to it. It's not too salty from the butter. You don't want to add any more salt to this dish, but it's not too salty. A word about this sauce. Reheating it, yeah, it's not going to reheat so nicely. The minute you stick it back in a pan, really super low heat, just enough to barely melt the butter. And if you stick it in the microwave, you're going to cook those butter fats and your sauce is going to separate. It's going to look like an oily mess of goo. This, however, this is what you pay big bucks for at a restaurant. This stuff is liquid gold. I'm going to take a piece of asparagus right here. Normally I would plate this up. I would put a nice presentation of asparagus on a plate, and then I would have a little squirt bottle. You know, I love my squirt bottles. And drizzle over some sauce over the plate to make it look beautiful. This time, however, I've just got that. Oh, I wanted to tell you, I'm going to pop a link to my favorite silicone whisk in the description field below, so don't forget to check that out. Now, of course, the true taste. Here we go. There is something so magical about, there's something wrong with this dish. I don't have enough sauce. That's more like it. This sauce is so good. Forget the asparagus, go for the sauce. But the pairing of asparagus and lemon is classic and it's delicious. And I could eat this all day long. You can also use this sauce for Eggs Benedict. That would be good too. That's it. Super easy, super simple. You've just made a restaurant quality butter sauce in hardly any time. Don't forget to subscribe. It's that red button down there. It'd really help me out if you could click that. And that's it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. I get back to you pretty quickly. And I hope to see you back here soon. Again, I'm Jen from KetoCookingWins.com. And we just made a lemon butter sauce to go with steamed asparagus. Happy cooking!